Welcome to the Perfectly Flawed podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, for those that don't know you, would you like to give a bit of an overview of who you are?
Hi guys, my name's Kiah Melverton. I'm a long distance swimmer, particularly the 800, 1500. I've recently just moved up to St. Peter's Western to train with Dean Boxall and Arnie and the rest of that squad, and recently competed at the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo, where I finished sixth in both the 800 and 1500.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, there's so many things that I want to ask you about in terms of like Tokyo and long distance swimming, but we'll go from the beginning. How did you get into swimming?
I was always doing surf lifesaving. I've been in the pool my whole life. I've always loved the water. I was one of those kids that kind of just got chucked in the pool and have never really gotten out of it. But I definitely did surf lifesaving until I was maybe 15, 16, and that was my focus. Swimming was kind of on the side. I think I only swam like 3 or 4 times a week until I was 13, 14, and then kind of started to take it a bit more seriously and add in a few more sessions. Qualified for my first age nationals when I was 15 or 14, decided not to go, wanted to do Aussies instead. So like was not focused on pool swimming at all. The next year qualified again in a few more events, and it was like, come on, like what do you want to do? Do you want to do swimming or do you want to do surf? Like you kind of need to start making a decision. Still wanted to do both. I was lucky that year that the pool stuff kind of aligned with the surf, so we could do both. So I ended up doing both. So I'm really well. And then by the time I was 17, I knew that there might have been a bit more of a career for me in swimming, and I decided to focus on swimming. But yeah, I've always been one of those kids that's been in the water doing everything, but it definitely wasn't something that I took serious until I was probably about 15.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's so common in swimming because it's such a demanding sport. Like it requires quite a lot of training, quite intense from really quite a young age. What was it like, as you said, at that sort of 15 sort of age, being told, what do you want to do? Like that's quite a big decision to make at that age, I would think. What was that like?
Yeah, it was a really big decision, and I have such a love for surf lifesaving. Anyone that's done surf lifesaving knows what the culture's like, and the training's a bit more fun and it's a bit more social. When you get in the pool, it's just you and the black line, and there's a lot less talking and there's a lot less chatting. So it was a very hard conversation. I think I was kind of fortunate though that I wasn't one of those guys that had been flogging themselves since they were 10 years old. And I wasn't going to age nationals when I was 10, and I wasn't doing 10 sessions a week when I was 10 years old. So I kind of had only like settled into it when I was 15, which a lot of people that I were racing when I was like 13, 14 had already decided to leave the sport because they were sick of it. They'd been doing so much for so many years, and I'd kind of had that opportunity to focus on something else and just swim on the side. And then I think when I got to 15, 16, it made it a lot easier to commit to swimming because I wasn't over it, and I hadn't had those years of doing like Ks and Ks and Ks and spending all my time at the pool. I was like, no, like I can do something different now. Now's my chance to focus on swimming. But like you said, like it is a hard decision. I have lots of friends within the surf lifesaving community, and I don't really want to leave them. But I think when you get to around that 17 years age, it's the same kind of thing with swimming. Like people stay in the sport or they don't. And a lot of people that I knew were moving on from surf lifesaving and just, going to uni, and they'd finished school and they wanted to focus on other things. So that kind of helped as well. But yeah, I'm just glad that I had the chance to do something else before I really started focusing on swimming.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think obviously the two sort of work hand in hand to a point, and then obviously, depending on where you want to go, you have to sort of stick to one. How did you find then at that younger sort of age balancing the two?
Yeah, I think it was for me, it was just about being in a routine. So I had my days that I did surf training, and I had my days that I did pool training. And, I was nothing special in the pool. I just loved getting in and doing it. I wasn't one of those 12 or 13-year-olds that's winning nationals or breaking records or anything like that. So I think that kind of took the pressure off the pool. And I knew that the pool complemented my surf training almost perfectly. I had a coach that used to say to me, like swimmers make really good board paddlers don't make good swimmers. So swimming was kind of like the base for all of our surf training. So I was kind of using swimming to help my surf training. So I knew that if I wanted to get everything done, it was just about balancing it. You'd have your days where you go to the lake in the morning and you do a flat water session on the board, and then, you're straight to school, and then you're at the pool in the afternoons. And surf's quite good. They're flexible. They know that we want to do swimming and we want to do running, and we have board training, and then we do like irons on the weekend and stuff like that. So I mean, it's a lot. And like when you're that age, like you're still doing something every single morning and every single afternoon, but it was nice to have that balance between the two.
Yeah, and obviously gives a little more variety compared to what, doing a 1500 or 800 sort of training in a pool is like, I'm sure.
Yeah,
What's it
exactly. I
like?
don't think I've ever been so fit when I was doing that kind of stuff. You're in
Yeah.
and out of the water, you're running up and down the beach. Like, you have to be so insanely fit to do that. So I think that has probably helped me in the long run anyway. And, I might have been like 13, 14 years old when I was doing it, but it's probably helped me become more of a distance swimmer, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. What was it? Do you think then, obviously you said, that routine and that balance is super important. And, once you sort of establish that, it makes it a lot easier. Do you think that skill is something you've been able to apply sort of later in life and now as well?
Yeah, I think like when you get to my age and you're swimming and you're doing uni, or the guys that are swimming and they're still going through high school, your whole life comes down to time management. And I like to sit down at the start of my week and kind of plot out where my sessions are and what I'm going to do. And I like to keep myself busy. And when I'm at uni, I tend to do like 2 or 3 subjects, and it forces you to keep on top of it, because if you don't keep on top of it, you're going to fall way behind. And then it just turns into this big downward spiral where you have to catch up on like weeks worth of uni or weeks worth of school. So being on top of it's super important. And, you feel a lot better for yourself when you're on top of it. But I like to take the time to plan my week out and write down hour to hour what I'm going to be doing. And, when I'm swimming, when I'm going to go to uni, when I'm seeing a physio, when I'm getting massage, like everything. I'm one of those people that likes to just write down everything and has a list for every single day. That's the way I do it.
Yeah, I love lists. They're like my best friend. And I have like,
Yeah.
even sitting in front of me now, I have like a full planner of like planning out my my week and everything. I'm
Yeah.
very
I'm
much
the
the
same.
same.
Yeah, I would just sit and write lists for everything. I'm leaving for Mackay for a training camp on Sunday, and I've got a list in front of me on the table of like what I need to pack and like what I need to make sure I have in my bag, like ready to go. And like, this is Sunday, I have so much time to do it, but I just like to have my list written out.
Oh, it's so helpful. Speaking of balance, then, like obviously, as you said, planning is super important and scheduling those things in. How do you find then, like you say you're super busy and you love being busy, that's sort of like where you thrive. What does rest look like for you then? Is that something that you then schedule in, and how do you sort of switch off and disengage from swimming? Because that's something that I've sort of learned through speaking to different people, regardless of the sport, that having that time away and disengaging from it is super important. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it is super important. And I think like coming off something like Tokyo, we took like 8 weeks or something out of the water, and you kind of get thrown into like, you need to rest, like you're not exercising, like just take some time. And it's probably something that I've always struggled with. I'm one of those people that like come Sunday, you're not doing any training, there's nothing scheduled in, but I want to get up and I want to go for a walk, or I want to go for a run, or I want to do something, because I can't sit still. And I constantly need to be reminded that it's okay to rest and it's okay to do nothing. And there's a lot of, like, for me personally, there's a lot of guilt that comes with resting and not doing anything. Like Wednesday, Friday afternoons, we have those sessions off, and I get a bit restless and I'm like, oh, what am I doing? Like, I need to be doing something. And I think it's something that you need to practice. And if you have people around you like I do that just remind you that, like, no, it's okay to rest, like you're just going to run yourself into the ground long term. You need to take these opportunities. Your coach has given you these sessions off for a reason. There's a reason behind the rest. But again, like, I think it's just practicing resting. And for me, it's going away, catching up with a friend, or sitting down reading a book, putting on Netflix, doing something that kind of keeps me distracted, but in a restful way.
Yeah, I'm so much the same. Like I'm like listening to you talk, I'm like, I have the same issue. Like I feel so guilty for resting. I was even saying it to my coach the other day. I'm like, I should be doing something. And he's like, why? I'm
Yeah.
like, because I can't just sit here and do nothing. He's like, but you're sore. Like we had a really hard week. Like you need to take time to rest so that you can perform again. Otherwise, you're going to be annoyed that you're not hitting the times that you want in the next session. Like you need to take this time to just rest, sit on the couch, put on a movie and just relax. And I'm like, but I need to do something. Like I feel guilty, like I'm not being productive. Like I need to like tick things off.
Yeah, I'm literally the exact same. Like I'll be sitting there and I'm worried that I'm not doing enough in the pool. And then come Wednesday, Friday afternoons, you're just kind of sitting around and you're like, oh, do I go for a run? Like, do I go to a different pool and do something else? Like, what can I do that's like something to keep me going? But I think over the years, I've learned that rest is super important and more isn't always more. And I think that's something that I've really carried through with me in the past couple of years. Sometimes less is more, and it's important to take care of yourself. You don't need to run yourself into the ground constantly.
Yeah. We'll kind of go a little bit backwards this time because you sort of touched on how after Tokyo you had that 8 weeks off. We'll talk about that and then we'll come back to what the Tokyo experience was like. So that 8 weeks out of the pool, how did you manage that then?
Yeah, look, it was very interesting. I was kind of like, I like to run and keep myself moving. And, I was just trying to do stuff to keep myself moving, but in more of like a mental health way rather than like a physical health way. But it was challenging. We came off like this huge competition and then we spent 2 weeks in quarantine where we could do almost nothing. Your body changes a lot in 8 weeks. And, that was something that I really struggled to deal with as well. And that was kind of towards the end of it, it was like a driving factor of like why I wanted to get back in the pool. And I was like, well, that shouldn't really be a factor of why you want to get back in the pool. You should be wanting to get back in because you love swimming, not because you're trying to lose weight or look a certain way. And, it was all these like little things that, are quite difficult to deal with. And you don't really realize what it's like when you come off and you have that big break. I think the most time I'd ever spent out of the water before that was maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So then you get chucked in and it's 8 weeks. And like, that's a really long time. And like I found myself going back to the pool like earlier than I should have, just maybe like 3, 4 times a week, just in the mornings, to almost put myself in a routine. Because like I said before, I hate not having a routine. And if I was getting up at 6 and I was training from 6:30 to 8:30, and then I could come home and then like get on with my day. So I like to like set up a routine, do something in the morning, and then get on with my day. But it was a very interesting period, a period of very, very forced rest, I think. Well, I mean, we all needed it, but it was just brought its own challenges, I guess.
Yeah. And I'd love to delve in further into what you said about how your body sort of changes because I mean, with any sport, your body's sort of on display and it's supposed to look this way. You got to be strong and lean. And, there's all these sort of terms that get thrown around that as an athlete and how it sort of, should in quotations look like. How did you sort of manage that? And do you think, then going back to swimming, were you sort of conscious being in bathers? Because obviously when you're in bathers, like everything's sort of on show.
Yeah, I mean, swimming is a very unique sport in that aspect. You're right. We're in bathers, like, you can see every single part of your body. And coming off 8 weeks of not doing anything, not only do you have 8 weeks of not doing anything, but before those 8 weeks, you were in the best physical shape you've ever been in your whole entire life because you're at the Olympics. Like, that's the pinnacle of your sport. Like, that's the leanest you've ever been, the strongest you've ever been. Like, you're in your top physical performance. And then all of a sudden you have 8 weeks off, and obviously a lot changes. And it's something that I've always struggled with. I've always struggled with my body image. I've always struggled with confidence. I constantly compare myself to other girls on pool deck, and I've spoken to psychologists about it, and like coping mechanisms. And you're right, like swimming, it's a very unique sport. You're in bathers, you can't really hide. And I think coming back from the Olympics and, I just joined a new squad up at St. Peter's, and, it was nice to talk to the other girls that were there, and, everyone's kind of going through the same experience. And like, just to sit down and talk with those girls and be like, hey, it's okay. Like, look, we just had 8 weeks off. Like, we're expected to put on weight. Like, that's just how it is, like everyone was in the same kind of boat, which helped. There was no one that was coming back after that break that looked exactly like they did at the Olympics. And, I'm really fortunate. I've never had like a coach or a leader or a mentor or anyone kind of say something negative about my weight. I'm very lucky in that aspect. But personally, like it's something that I've always struggled with, and I've just brought it upon myself that I'm one of those people that just likes to compare myself to everyone around me. So when I was in that situation, knowing that other girls were going through the same thing as me was something that really helped.
Yeah. And obviously you sort of said that, it's something that's sort of been around for a while. It wasn't new to you sort of post Olympics. What are some of those tips or strategies that you sort of learned to either, sort of dull those thoughts down?
Yeah, so I mentioned before that I'd like spoken to a psychologist about it. And if you look at someone like, I mean, I don't want to like name people here, but if you look at someone like Emma McKeon, who's like the most successful Olympian that Australia's ever had, right? She has like a very different stature to someone else who's like super successful, someone like Ledecky or Simone Manuel, who like races the same events to her, right? They have completely different body shapes, but like they're both super successful. So like just how you look doesn't determine how well you're going to perform. And so I would be standing on pool deck kind of comparing myself to other girls that are in my event and being like, oh, like she looks really skinny and she looks really lean. And like my psychologist kind of brought it back to, but yeah, how are you performing? Like, how do you feel upon yourself? And taking away from that comparative kind of thing and bringing it back to how you feel about yourself. Um, it's also hard with Instagram and TikTok, and you see all these models that are like stick thin, and we're athletes, we're meant to be strong, and we're meant to have this big build, and swimmers, we have big shoulders, and we have really muscly arms, and our back's super muscly, and like you see that and you're like, well, why can't I just look like these like skinny girls on TikTok that look really pretty and are doing their little dances, or these Instagram models in bikinis? Like, why don't I look like that in a bikini? And it's like, but can they swim an 800 fast? Can they swim a 1500 fast? Probably not. So it's kind of just bringing it back to that and realizing that you look a certain way because of how you perform. And if you're feeling good, regardless of how much you weigh or what your skin folds are or all that kind of stuff, like if you're feeling good and swimming fast, that's all that matters. And there's so many more things that go into your performance than your weight and how you look. You have to feel good to be able to swim fast. I think that's the most important thing to take away from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even touching on what you said about like how Instagram and TikTok and the social media, how you see like all these beautiful women on there. I mean, obviously, you do get quite a wide range of different body types on there, but like from my point of view, like I've seen someone, I'm like, oh, like they look stunning in that. Like I would love to wear something like that. And I try it on, I'm like, that does not fit my shoulders and it just looks trash. And then you feel shit about yourself. It's like, well, I have shoulders that allow me to swim. Like it's not, do you know what I mean? Like sometimes I go shopping and it's like, well, that doesn't fit. And then you feel crap. It's like, well, my body type isn't the same as everybody else's.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, like you said, like, and we're not even like necessarily going out of our way to follow all these like models on Instagram. It's not like I sit there and I follow like a list of girls who are super skinny and post bikini photos, but you click on your explore page and it's all you see. It's like you just get caught interacting with it a few times and then all of a sudden you can't escape it. And you're right, it is really hard, but I think for me it's just bringing it back to how I want to look for my sport and how I need to look to perform. And I've been doing it for long enough that I know what I need to weigh and how strong I need to be and how I need to look for me to swim at my best. And I think it's just making it more of a like performance aspect rather than like a lifestyle. We're never like, I'm an athlete, I'm never going to look like these girls who weigh 45 kilos whose biceps are as skinny as my wrist. Like that's just not, like it's just not going to happen. Like I'm an athlete and I need to accept that, and that's how it is, and that's what it is while I'm competing. And then if I want to change how I look later on in life, like that's a problem for later. But right now I'm an athlete and I'm trying to swim a fast 800 and 1500, and that needs to be the focus. So I need to work on my strength and I need to work on my nutrition, and you need to work on all these little things so that you can perform your best.
Yeah. And even further on that, you can look at, someone that does shot put to long distance running, to swimming, to gymnastics, and all these various sports. Like they're the top in their field, but, their body types between each sport look vastly different.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's like a photo that one of the American like news cover things did, and it was like a photo of all these different athletes from all the different sports of people that had gone to the Olympics, right? So you've got like gymnasts standing next to swimmers, standing next to shot putters, standing next to basketballers, standing next to volleyballers, and it's just amazing to see like the wide array of body shapes. But everyone's at their very, very best. Like all of these guys have gone to the Olympics, and it's like you don't have to look a certain way to be successful. Like at the end of the day, you don't have to look at like a certain way. Like I'm never going to look like a shot putter. A shot putter's never going to look like me. But we could both go to the Olympics and do extremely well. Like you don't have to fit that certain like criteria that people put on sports to be successful.
Yeah, 100%. I do want to talk about Tokyo now. What was that sort of build up like? We'll start with, the lead into trials. What was trials like? And then realizing that you qualified. What was that experience like?
Trials was crazy. It was like, oh, I've never been so nervous in my entire life. I think the 400 was first. And I was really hoping to do well in that. I kind of had a slight chance, but there's in my events, there's like maybe 6 girls that are all going under the qualifying time. And I think almost the whole final went under the qualifying time. So it's a very like tough event to qualify in. And that was first for me. And the whole day, I think my heart rate was so high. Like I could constantly feel my heart beating in my chest. I could not nap during the day. Usually I nap during the day. I was so panicked. I had just like sat on the lounge room and read a book the whole day because that was the only way I could kind of relax. Went into that, finished third. So I didn't qualify. So that was like a bit of a weird experience. The girl who came second is like one of my best friends. So like obviously I was super stoked for her that she qualified, and I'd swum a PB, so I couldn't be like that annoyed. But obviously like I'd wanted that second spot too. So then to have to go back and kind of be like, oh crap, like now I have the 800 and the 1500, and obviously I had good chances in those too, but I was like in this really weird headspace, like, well, what if I don't do it? Like what happens if I don't do this? Like everyone's expecting me to do it. What happens if I don't? And the 1500 came around and I was super, super nervous for that too. Again, like spoke to my coach, and I was like almost shaking. I was almost like in tears walking to the marshalling room. And the 1500, it was a bit of a blur. And it ended up being a race between me and another girl, Moesha, who swam a huge PB. I know you've spoken to her on this before, and and that was really hard too, because I just out touched her, and then she came third, and then she just missed achieving her goal. And it's like trials is just like this huge mix of like ups and downs, and like you could be on the highest high, and then you've got people that are on like the lowest lows in the line next to you, and it's just like that. They say like that the warm-up pool of trials is like half tears, half chlorine, because there's just so many tears and so many upsets, and then you've got people that are happy, and it's like it's really hard to balance that, because then like we're both walking back to the coach, and it's like one of us is over the moon and one of us is like super upset, and it's like you have to kind of be selfish in that retrospect, because we both had the 800 2 days later, and so we both had to be kind of selfish and go off and do our own things and not let others' emotions kind of like get a hold of you. And then you have the 800 on the next day. And I mean, for me, I'd already qualified in the 15, so the 800 I had no pressure on me, and it turned out to be like one of my better races of the meet, I think personally, and I swam it exactly how I wanted to. But I think it just goes to show like how much the pressure of an Olympic trials can affect how you race, because my 400 and my 1500, I did not race them the way I wanted to. Like almost nothing went to plan, because I was so stressed and focused on the result of going to Tokyo. And then once I knew I was going, the 800 was just like perfect. It was like the easiest 800 I've ever done. Like it was a PB. It was just like floating through the water. And I was like, wow, it's amazing what happens when you don't have like this pressure that you put on yourself.
Yeah. And I would love to know how you sort of navigate that. Because as you said, you've got a good friend next to you who's just missed out and you've qualified, and it's, what you've sort of dreamed of and planned for so many years, particularly, that it was put off a year. So it's 5 years in the making.
Yeah.
How do you celebrate your win, but still be respectful for the fact that they've just missed out?
Yeah, it's super hard. And I think a lot of people struggle with it. Like, I mean, I struggled with it at trials, and then I struggled with it again at the Olympics. Like I had another, like my teammate in the 1500 didn't swim the way that she wanted to. And, it's hard, because like you want to go and console them and be there for them, and, check in on them and make sure they're okay. But also like I kind of have to be selfish in a degree, because I have another race 2 days later, and I can't let their emotions impact how I'm going to race. And, it creates this really weird dynamic. And I think it takes like certain kind of people to be able to navigate that really well. And I think it's something that only like athletes understand. I mean, I'm sure you've had experiences where you've done really well and one of your friends hasn't. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of a weird mix of emotions. You want to be happy, and like they probably want to see you being happy too. They don't want to see you not celebrating what you've done. And it kind of creates this like weird balance between people. And it is something that's super hard to navigate. But I think just letting them know that you're there for them, and like if they want someone to talk to, you're there too. But you also have to be selfish and not let their emotions get in the way of how you're feeling. You deserve to celebrate how you went. You can't tiptoe around people, I guess. If you've achieved a lifelong dream, like you deserve to celebrate that, and you deserve to be ecstatic and happy, and you can't tiptoe around other people because they didn't do what they wanted to do, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, in sport, there's so many ups and downs. I think everyone's been on each end of the scale. And I think
Yeah.
even one time, I don't know if this is just immaturity or naive or not having the experience, but my friend did really well and I didn't. And when she was trying to console me, I was kind of like angry at her. I'm like, you've done so well. Like, why are you talking to me? Like, I don't want to talk to you. And I was like, really getting really annoyed. But like, now that I've been on the other side, you're just trying to help. Like, you don't mean,
Yeah.
there's no malicious intent there. You're trying to do the right thing and be a friend, but it is really hard trying to be respectful and be there for them without, sort of rubbing it in their face at the same time.
Yeah, I think what you said just then, like it is like people almost think it is malicious when you're congratulating someone who maybe hasn't sung that well, and like it happened to me at the Olympics. I went to congratulate other girls and it like almost comes off as like rubbing it in their face, but I would never want that. And I'd never intentionally want it to come across like that. And I just wanted to be there for them. And sometimes it gets misconstrued and it's really unfortunate that it does. But it's hard. I think you need to see it from both sides. And a lot of people, they don't necessarily see it from that side. And I think a lot of people who do swim really well act in my way too. You're just looking out for people and you want to care for people and you want to check in on them. And like, it's hard. It never comes across as malicious. But if you go to be like, oh my God, well done to your friend who's just swum like 10 seconds over their PB, it's like how do you think they're going to feel? But then like if you didn't say anything, it's wrong as well. So it becomes this like really awkward balance. And I think it's something that athletes constantly have to deal with. And I think it's just it's something that you learn growing up. You've got to be a gracious winner, but you also have to be like gracious in defeat as well.
Yeah, 100%. So you've done trials, you've qualified for the 15 and 18, the 1500 and the 800. What's sort of then the process between trials and Tokyo? What's that lead in like?
Yeah, so we had planned to spend, I think, maybe 2 weeks on the Gold Coast. So I was still training at TSS at this point. So we'd planned to spend maybe 2 weeks there. And then we were about a week in and we got a call saying, yeah, there's a few COVID cases. We need to get you to Cairns immediately. So we had about 4 hours to pack our bags and that was it. And we were going. And so it was kind of a big rush. I was in a panic to see like family and all that kind of stuff before I went. Like I wanted to see my grandparents before I went to Tokyo. It was all kind of a big panic. But yeah, we got shipped up to Cairns and then I think we had 4 weeks, 4 weeks in Cairns, maybe 3 weeks in Cairns on training camp. So, you had the whole team together and that was really good and that was really special. And it was a really good team and the whole team got along. And it was nice to be training with 50 other athletes that all have the same goal as you. And, everyone's going to the Olympics and everyone wants to swim fast. And you'd have not only like you'd have our session going across like 2 lanes, like Chris would maybe have our guys in 2 lanes, but 3 lanes over, you can see someone doing a really great set and all of a sudden the pool stops and everyone's cheering for them because they're doing something. And, it's just like a really good atmosphere and environment to be a part of. And then we went to Tokyo as early as we could. I think it was only maybe 4 days before competition. It wasn't long at all. We didn't have that much time to settle in. We're quite lucky that the time difference isn't anything too crazy. I think it's only about 2 hours. But yeah, like getting into the village, I think we arrived at like 3 a.m. one morning. Like it was absolutely ridiculous. And everyone was so exhausted and we're trying to get bags and, you've got to get like your COVID testing tubes and you've got to find out who your room, and it was just like a big mess and everyone was so tired. And I think we just like came down, fought each other for like the shower after you get off the plane. Like everyone jumped in the shower and then it was like crashed and went to bed. And that was our first day in the village. But yeah, the village experience is like no other. I'm pretty fortunate that I've had like kind of village experiences in terms of like com games and like world university games. So I kind of knew what to expect, but it's like a very cool like mayhem kind of thing. You've got people from all different sports and like their dining hall is absolutely massive and the Aussies had this like perfect little setup downstairs and it's just a really cool environment to have not only the swimmers but like all the Aussie athletes together. It was a really cool environment.
Yeah. What was it like in Tokyo in terms of like, obviously you sort of touched on the village experience was pretty great and something that wasn't too unfamiliar. What was then the swimming aspect of it like? What was your racing like?
So the pool, like the Tokyo pool was great. It was just done up for the Olympics. It was a brand new pool. We were very fortunate to have that. Obviously we had no crowds. which was kind of different. I've been asked a few times what it was like with no crowds and if I think it made a difference to how I swam. And honestly, you can't really hear it when you've got your head in the pool for 800, 1500 meters. And you don't notice it when you're walking out behind the blocks. Like, I was so nervous anyway. All I could think about was getting out behind the right lane and taking off my uniform and taking off my mask, because like we obviously had to wear masks out behind the blocks, which is something new. So, there was a lot of other distractions going on, and we were fortunate enough that like whoever wasn't racing out of the Aussies was in the stands cheering everyone on. So it was actually a really good atmosphere. And the girls kicked us off on the very first day, breaking the world record and winning gold in the 4x100 freestyle relay. And I think Brendan Smith might have been on the first day too with his bronze in the 400 AM. He was maybe first or second day. So it really just set the tone for the whole Aussie team. And, all the swimmers were just getting behind everyone's back. And I don't think anyone walked away from that feeling like they didn't have a team of people behind them, which I think was the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I saw an article somewhere that you sort of said about how, you train, 4 years, and in this case, 5 years for, 1, 2 races, whatever that sort of looks like for your, event schedule. And there's sort of a bit of luck in the sense that, what are the chances of you being in your absolute prime of your career on this exact day and getting that race and swimming it perfectly? Because it's your first Olympics and there's all this pressure and nerves, and now you've got a COVID element in there too. What was that sort of experience like for you then, and how do you think, reflecting back, how you performed?
Yeah, you're right. Like I do think that there is like this like tiny element of luck. You've got to be at the peak of your career, and everyone peaks at different stages, and someone might be swimming great 2 years prior to the Olympics, and then that's their best year. And it is hard, and there's obviously ways that we can control that, like you've got your training and all that kind of stuff. And if you're doing absolutely everything right, then the aim is to be at your very, very best during the Olympics. It doesn't happen to everyone, but that's what it is. Like, that's what we want, and that's the sport that we're in, and that's just kind of how it is. You look at someone like Ariane and how she handled it. She had a lot of pressure going into that, and she handled it extremely, extremely well, and was able to perform at her very best and probably exceeded some of her expectations in the 200 and the 800. So, like, it obviously can be done, and to go there for your first Olympics, and like her and Kaylee and Brendan to step up and perform the way they did is just incredible. Like, to swim that well in your very first Olympics and under all that kind of pressure, it's like full credit to them. For me, I think I was more nervous at the trials than I was at the Olympics, to be honest. I think I had more pressure on myself to get on the team. And then once I was on the team, I felt a lot more relaxed, which I think it worked in my favor. But the turnaround between trials and the Olympics is 5 weeks. And I think that's very hard for a distance swimmer to fully taper for trials, because I have to be on my very, very best to qualify, right? So my events that I do are super competitive. There's so many girls that are going under qualifying times. There's so many girls that are close together. I have to be on my very, very best for trials. And then to get the Ks back up and then also rest again within a 5-week period, it's like a very awkward time for a distance swimmer, I think. I think sprinters, they settle into less Ks, and they have more chance of recovery, and they kind of just keep an extended taper, and then they're ready to go again. Whereas as a distance swimmer, traditionally you need to like kind of get some more work in before you rest again, or you're just going to fall in this big hole, and you're going to lose some of that aerobic element that is your biggest strength. So that time period was really difficult for me. There was lots of like a few weeks in Cancer, I was just doing like absolute crap. And like, obviously your headspace isn't great when you're swimming like crap, and the Olympics are 3 weeks away. So that was kind of hard to deal with. But yeah, so that 5-week turnaround does make a big difference. And like, I mean, I'll be honest, like I wasn't happy with how I performed at the Olympics. My 1500, I wasn't really training for it. I kind of went in there with no expectations. I was surprised that I'd even qualified in the 1500. I really didn't think that was my event. So that was kind of nice to get in and swim, and all I wanted to do was make the final, and I was fortunate enough to make the final. So I kind of feel like I had my goal ticked, and swam in the final and finished 6th, and like obviously like 6th in the world, like I can't complain. Like, it would kind of sound ridiculous for me to complain about that, but at the time I was disappointed. And then the 800, we had heats at night, so that made getting into the final super difficult. So I had to swim pretty much almost on my PB to make the final. Just snuck in an outside lane. But I knew that if I was on my best, like I could be right there with them. Like I wasn't out of touch in the 800, and I knew that if I swam at my very, very best, like I could be right there. And if I'm there, then I have a chance, and I can be competitive over that last 100 meters. But yeah, I dived in and I felt okay, and then all of a sudden everyone's gone in front of me, and your head starts playing these little games with you, and like I was super disappointed. And again, I came sixth in that. And I know it sounds silly to say, being sixth at the Olympics is disappointing, but it was. And I remember getting out of the pool, and like Arnie had just swum so well. She was second behind Katie, and we were kind of walking over to Channel 7, and he was like, "Oh, Kiah, do you want to chat?" And I was kind of like, "No, you can just talk to Arnie. It's fine. Like, no one wants to hear what I have to say. Like, I was just six. Like, I'm just like in the background. Like, no one really cares. I'm just gonna walk out." And then I kind of came around and saw my coach, and I just burst into tears. And like it sounds so silly saying it back now, but like crying over a sixth place at the Olympics. But I was in tears, and I just took off I remember taking off my suit. It was my last race. I was like, I'm not warming down. There's no way I'm getting in the pool. And I knew that I had to be back up in the stands to cheer for the other guys. And so I kind of went to the bathroom for a bit, and I like was bawling my eyes out. And you've probably seen it. I've posted the photo of me on Instagram when I was like in the toilet crying, and I had all these red puffy eyes, and I was like, Kiah, come on, pull yourself together, like get up into the stands, and like, come on, you need to cheer on the rest of people. There's like 5 more races tonight. We've got people swimming, like, come on, pull yourself together. And I went up into the stands, and there's a few people there, Tamsin being one of them, one of the girl who swam in the 400, one of my closest friends. And she kind of just like put her arm around my shoulder and was like, I'm proud of you. And I just like burst into tears again. But it was just so nice to have like that kind of atmosphere and have people there that like, regardless of how you swim, they still love you and they still support you. And I think I could have finished dead last in that race, and she would have said the exact same thing to me. So I think it's just nice to have that. But yeah, it was weird kind of dealing with that disappointment of like actually swimming really well, and like it's an amazing achievement, but it still felt like disappointment to me.
Yeah. And obviously, like, the race goes quickly, but at the same time, when you're in it, it feels like a really long time. And that's a long time to be in your head on your own with no one
Yeah.
else's input. It can be quite full on. What was that sort of inner monologue like for you during that race?
Yeah. I mean, I won't talk about the ones at the Olympics, but I have a good example of me from trials in the 1500. I think if someone had had like a little microphone and could listen to what I was saying, they would be laughing themselves silly during my 1500 at trials, because I dived in, and at that stage, me, Maddie, and Mo were all training together. Like we're all training buddies. There was 3 of us, and it was us 3 and another girl, Karina, who would probably like, it was out of us 4, we were probably going to be the ones that 2 would be selected. And I was kind of like, okay, come on, Kiah, you can do this. Just relax, take it out easy first 500. And I turned at 500, and I think I was like 4th. And I was like, well, shit. I was like, that's it. It's gone. There's a K left of the race. And I was like, that's it. It's gone. You haven't done the work for it. You're never going to make it. Like, and I'm swimming up and down, and, I can see Mo's feet getting like further and further in front of me, and Karina's taking off like 3 lanes away. And I was like, well, that's it. Like, good luck in the 800, but the 1500, like that's not your chance. And then maybe 200 meters of me being a little negative Nancy, I was like, hang on, Kiah, you have 800 meters left. Pull yourself together and get in there and bloody swim. Like, you know how to swim a 1500, just get in there and race. Like, I don't care if you get to the wall and you have to get out and an ambulance has to drive you away from this pool. Like, you're giving everything. You're not throwing away 5 years worth of training because you're being negative. Like, you've trained for this for 5 years. Like, grow up, pull yourself together and get back in the race. And so I think it was just funny for me, like looking back on that and like listening to my self-talk. And Mo and I caught Karina, and then it was between the 3 of us, and we know how that played out. But it was just funny listening to how much I'd like doubted myself, but then also how quickly I could change it around. And like this very competitive side of me came out, which I'm super thankful that I have this competitive side. But yeah, it was just funny how quickly that came out, and I guess how easy it is to fall in that trap of self-talk if things aren't necessarily going your way. it's a reason why I love the 1500 and I hate the 1500, because it is a long time in your head and you have so much to think about, and it can be very easy to slip into that negativity if you're not where you think you are. But again, the 1500, it gives you so much time to fix things. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's tough physically, but it's tough mentally. And I think some people, just particularly if they're not in swimming, they don't realize how much time in your head and how like mentally draining a race like that can be.
Yeah, and I think like for distance swimmers as well, like the training is so mentally draining as well. You know, you're in that situation day after day, and you're constantly comparing yourself to what other people are doing next to you in the pool, and you know you've got to fight those mental battles every single day. And I know you spoke to Kai Edwards a little bit on this, his 10K swimmer, and I've had trained with him for about 7 years. And I think like what he said is so spot on. It's just it becomes this big mental battle. I think distance swimming is more mental than physical. Sprinting probably more physical than mental. You know, they've got to be these strong and they're super quick and super fast twitch, and they've got to get every little physical thing right. But I think some of the best distance swimmers are the ones who are mentally the toughest.
Yeah, 100%. What would you say then? Like, obviously, being a distance swimmer, it's quite mentally tough. What would you say has been one of the biggest challenges or setbacks that you've had to overcome?
Um, the biggest thing for me was, well, there's kind of two, I guess. Leading into the Commonwealth Games in 2018, again, a lot of pressure. The Commonwealth Games are on the Gold Coast. I've lived my whole life on the Gold Coast. You know, there was a lot of pressure surrounding that. And I went there the first night and I missed the 400 free final. And I think I was ranked third and I didn't even make the final. And I was like, well, yeah, again, this is it. It's all over. And I had the 800 the next day, and my coach kind of told me to like go away from the pool and, you know, sort yourself out. Like, don't come back and train, just go away. And I went away and I did the whole like coloring in and reading and like completely switched off from swimming, and just realized again that like no matter how I swim, there's still people that love me, there's still people that support me. And at the end of the day, like really I have nothing to lose. And I know in this moment it seems like going to the Com Games or going to the Olympics is this like big be all and end all. And if you don't achieve it, like then you're like scum of the earth or like whatever you tell yourself in your head.
Mm.
But like at the end of the day, like in the big picture, like no one like really cares that much. And I think that was something that like a lot of us kind of learned coming back from the Olympics. Like you come back from the Olympics and you're on this big high and you expect everyone to care so much, and you get back into the real world and it's like, to be honest, no one really does. Like, yeah, it's a great achievement and like we should celebrate it, and it's something that very few people get to do. But you also have to remember that it's not the end of the world if you don't do it, and people aren't going to think of you differently if you don't. Another thing for me mentally that I've really had to overcome is the like comparing myself to other people. I used to really get caught up in it, especially when there was like the three of us at TSS training together. And it was just like every single day it was competitive. There wasn't a day where you couldn't be switched on or you weren't racing either one of the two girls. And I think that was really tough, you know. I train a lot differently to them and they train a lot differently to me. And, you know, I think probably all of us just got caught in this like very competitive headspace, and it became more of a negative environment than a positive environment towards the end. And I think you need to be like really cautious. Obviously, you know, I love having people to train with and I love having people to race, but there needs to be also like a level of support that comes from everyone. You know, you want to have everyone achieve their goals too. And if you're working together to both achieve your goals, like it's going to end up in a positive outcome rather than constantly comparing yourself and being like, well, if she's doing this, then why aren't I doing that? And she's swimming fast, why am I not swimming fast? And it just kind of puts you in this like real negative headspace, and then you don't want to go to the pool every day.
Yeah. And it can be quite tricky because, you sort of have to be competitive and race each other and push yourself. But yeah, it can be really hard to find that balance of not letting that turn into a negative.
Yeah, it's hard to find that balance of it being competitive in the pool, but like friends away from the pool. And I think there's like very few people that pull it off super, super successfully. You know, there's always going to be those moments between people. And I think that's just how it is at the end of the day. You know, you can do everything you can to try to keep it as a positive environment. But when you're putting elite athletes together in a competitive environment for years on end, constantly racing each other, it's very easy for it to slip into a negative.
Yeah, for sure. On the flip side of that, then, what would you say has been one of your biggest achievements so far?
Um, like as much as I say like that whole Com Games thing was like super hard for me to overcome, I think it was also one of my biggest achievements, because it was almost like a light bulb moment for me that like I just took like a lot of that pressure off my shoulders, and I was like, well, like it was almost like this light bulb moment that people don't really care how I perform, and I'm free to swim how I want, and I can just get in and I have nothing to lose. And I think that kind of changed the way that I race. 2020 nationals on the Gold Coast, I got in for the 400 free, and I just said, screw it, I'm going to go out as fast as I can, and whatever happens happens. And I did this spectacular display of sticking with Arnie for 150 meters and then getting absolutely swallowed by everyone else in the last 100 meters, and I was going backwards, and my mom was watching, and she's like, I thought we were going to have to send someone in to like fish you out of the pool. And I've never been in so much pain in my whole entire life, but like I had nothing to lose. Like, if I get in and I give it a shot and I do something different and I swim bad, like at the end of the day, like, does it really matter? Probably not. Like, who cares that I swam PB plus 10 or whatever it was? Who cares that my first 200 was 9 seconds faster than my second 200? Like, you just got to get in and do those kinds of things and realize that you do have nothing to lose. And I think swimming like that builds character, and it's important to do that. And it's important to realize that, like, and I know I make a joke of it, and I'm like, oh, I was just putting on a show, I was just like giving people something to laugh at, and like making light of those situations.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to ask you a question that I've recently started asking people, and I think it's really interesting to hear the answers. If younger Kiah could see where you are now, how do you think she would react?
I think she'd be shocked, probably. I don't think she ever thought she'd be going to the Olympics, and I don't think she ever thought she would be as successful in swimming as she is. I think I'd like to think she'd be proud of her. I think watching her, like if younger me was watching me over the past 3 months, I think she'd just want to give her a hug. It's been difficult moving. Like, I've had to move clubs and move from the Gold Coast to Brisbane, and I've lost a lot of friends in the past 6 months, and like it's just been like a very difficult 6 months for me. So I think maybe little Kiah would come and give big Kiah a hug, but I think at the end of the day, she'd be proud of where I am.
Yeah, for sure. And that sort of follows on into my next set of questions. And the first one is, what is something that you're most proud of about yourself?
I mean, I like to think that I'm a very caring and giving person, and I like to put my best foot forward in terms of my friends, and I like to make sure that they're achieving what they want to achieve. And I like to think that I'm a good shoulder to lean on, and I like to think that I have that caring and almost like the mum friend personality of the group.
Yeah, absolutely something you should be proud of. And I love asking that question because it's so rarely about sport.
Yeah.
So good.
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing. It's important to have things in your life that you're proud of that isn't sport, because sport doesn't define who you are. There's so many other things that you are besides an athlete.
100%. What is your favorite quote and or the best piece of advice that you've been given?
There's one that like really like sticks with me, and it's a bit of a silly one because I feel like it's super old, but like, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. You've probably all heard that one before, but I think that really resonates with me. And my former coach, Chris, used to always say that consistency is the hallmark of class. I think that's another super important one. You can come in and do one great set, that's great, but can you do a great set every single day for 6 weeks? Then that's consistency, and then you're becoming like a class athlete. So yeah, those are the two that have really stuck with me.
Yeah, they're really good ones. I've heard that first one before, but that other one, I haven't heard that before. I like it. It's good.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a little Chris Nesbitt piece of advice.
Yeah, it's good. The last question is, any tips or advice or anything else that you would like to add?
I mean, I know that I have like a good relationship with a lot of young female swimmers, and there's a lot of young female swimmers that follow me on Instagram, and they message me, asking me like little questions, and just want to say, like, if any of you guys are listening, like, feel free to message me, and like we'll have a chat about anything, whether it's swimming, it's life, whatever. I'm always here to have a chat with you guys. And I think for you guys, especially those ones around that like 15, 16 age group, I think the most important thing for you is to just have fun and enjoy what you're doing, and don't put so much pressure on yourself. And I know it's hard. I know you're sitting there looking at other girls that are maybe winning nationals, and they've gone to school nationals and they've won 7 gold medals, and it's like, well, I can't even qualify for nationals. Why am I not improving? But just remind yourself that I didn't even qualify for nationals until I was 16. I made the senior team when I was 21, which is late in terms of most people. I don't think there's any super linear pathway for anyone. If you keep putting in the work, and like I said before, consistency is the most important thing. If you're putting in the work, you will get results. So just being consistent with those kinds of things. But my Instagram DMs are always open if anyone wants to chat.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate chatting with you, and I think you've shared so many valuable lessons and insights into what swimming has been like for you. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries.